Welcome to the journey home. You know, sometimes it's hard for me to imagine what life would be like without a belief in God. My relationship with God through His Son, Jesus Christ, is so constant to me. It's been such a long, important part of my life for so many years that I can't imagine life without Jesus. Of course, the danger is that we can take Jesus for granted. We can become so accustomed to our faith that we go through the motions day by day, and yet it loses its joy, its centrality in our lives. But I still can't imagine what life would be without a belief in God. But it also amazes me when I do encounter people who claim to be of a religious group, but yet have no belief in God in reality. We call those cultural Catholics, cultural Jews. People claim to be Jewish, claim to be Catholic, but yet have no real religious aspect of their life. Now, I don't know if you know people like that. I do. I have someone fairly close to me who might call a cultural Jew, Jewish family, Jewish background, but yet no real religious aspect to their life. Well, I'm kind of close to someone also in tonight's program because my guest tonight, Myron Moskowitz, came from a Jewish background. And as we thought about a theme for tonight, and we always pick a theme which helps your phone calls because it's an important part of the program, is the theme of the centrality of God. One way of understanding that is the vertical. Our relationship with God also connected with our horizontal relationship with one another. And for those cultural religious folk, their whole life is focused in the horizontal and sometimes have no place in their heart, in their mind, in their priorities for any vertical relationship with a God, a creator. Their focus is all here and now. Well, that says a bit about where Myron came from. And Myron's here to share his journey of faith. And we need to pray for Myron and our program as we hear the story, but also as we hopefully will address the needs of your hearts. Thank you for joining us. You're an important part of this program. Give us a call if you have a question for Myron at 1-800-221-9460, or you can send us an email at journeyhome@EWTN.com. Myron, welcome to the Journey Home.
Thank you, Marcus.
It's good to have you here.
It's great.
You came a long way to get here, too.
About 906 miles.
Yeah, not the usual way flying over. You came...
The scenic route, driving. My wife, Myron, myself.
I've made that long trip from Ohio. You came from Pennsylvania. I made it from Ohio. It's a long, long drive, but it's beautiful. I mean, it's a pretty...
Yes.
It's a pretty...
They drive kind of fast down here, but it's still beautiful.
And I think your wife said that since you've been here the last couple of days, you've paid a few visits up north?
3 to the shrine.
It's neat.
Magnificent.
Wow.
Mother is to be commended.
Yeah, well, those sisters are a great inspiration to us all.
Yes, they are.
Let's begin, as we usually begin every week, to invite you to start by sharing your early spiritual upbringing, if you would.
Well, my early spiritual upbringing, my grandfather was a rabbi, and my father's brother was a rabbi. And despite that being the heritage, it somehow didn't filter down to me. My parents had some problems of their own, and religion just wasn't an important part of their life, and it really didn't become an important part or any part of my life. And just the problems they had filtered further down. I became rebellious at an early age and never really highly motivated in school. Even as I was going through school and getting a degree in phys ed, which I thought I would never use, and as I'll explain later, it's now a very big part of my life.
His plans are a bit different than
Oh yes, who was a catfish hunter said that somebody had told him, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans, and it's true. And going back to the beginning, like I said, there really was no religion, no thought about God or
Did you go through
anything.
the usual hoops, the Jewish hoops?
Somewhat.
Rites of passage?
Basically, with my uncle being the rabbi and having his own shul, I had private bar mitzvah lessons, but I never made it to a bar mitzvah. And in retrospect, I look back and think that that was all part of God's plan, even then, because He knew I'd be sitting here tonight. I thought I would have won lottery 18 straight weeks before it would have happened, but He knows. He definitely knows. And I drifted through a marriage and had 2 beautiful children from the marriage, and then divorce, and then I met my wife, Mary, who the biggest non-divine person in my life as far as getting me to where I am today by far. But I was somewhere around 1986 when I was through one of my jobs. I got this urge and desire, and something happened where I said I was going to become a screenwriter. And I started working at it, and I basically lived, breathed, ate. That's all that mattered to me outside of family. Just, I have to do this, and bit of an ego problem. I really felt I was better than what was being put out there. And I kept at it, and it became extremely frustrating. I'd go to the movies, and Mary would say, I don't want to hear it. I know your answer. You can do better. I said, yes, hon, that's right, so I'll spare you. And I feel sorry for her that she had to go to a movie with me, but she knew what she was going to say after. But the frustration point, it was like I was basically just living, going from check to check, pay the bills, eat, that's it, until I sell the first screenplay, then I'll sell the other 15, because I just kept writing. And one night when I came home from work after I was more frustrated than usual, a tougher day than usual, I said to Mary, I said, what does it take to sell one of these? I just don't understand. And Mary, being a cradle Catholic, she said to me, well, maybe he doesn't like what you're writing about. And basically what I was writing about was crime drama. But I said to her, what do you mean he might not like what I'm writing about? She said, Jesus. I said, hon, that's okay if you wrote the screenplays, but I wrote them. My name's Moskowitz. No disrespect. It doesn't mean anything to me. And a couple of weeks later, I had said to her, again, when I was extremely frustrated, I still don't understand. And she said, when he wants it to happen, not when you want it to happen, it will happen. I said, hon, is this the same he as a few weeks ago? She said, yes. I said, well, then it's the same answer. It has nothing to do with my writing. And I basically was in a good mood, I guess, for a few weeks because I wasn't complaining too much. But then when I got back to the complaining, I said, there's got to be more to life. Mary said, there is. I said, well, you're going to share this secret, or, you're going to keep it a secret? She said, why don't you try reading the Bible?
Let me stop there for a second, because I want to pick up on that a second. Let's talk to us about, like I said, I can't imagine life without Jesus. And I'm eternally grateful for his mercy and letting me know his love for me through my mother and father and through the churches and the witnesses and, on and on. I can't imagine what it would like to not have him as a part, but let me ask you that. Was there God in there at all?
No, I took it a step further. Not only was Jesus not in my life, God was not in my life. When I go out and give some talks and give witness to God and Jesus, what I like to say is I was so spiritually dead that rigor mortis had set in. And to me, the only meaning God had at that time was that it was worth 5 points in Scrabble. And it meant nothing more than that. It was, I think back now when my mother was very ill before she died, and my father very ill before he died, and when my brother had gotten shot when he was in Vietnam, that I never even said, why pray? It's not going to help. The thought of praying never even entered my mind. So it wasn't like I never felt I was turning my back on God. It was just, yes, I believed there was a God, but that's as far as it went. I would try never to take his name in vain, and I did one day, and even though I know when I was baptized, I started anew, it still bothers me that
Later.
I did that.
Back then.
Hopefully sometime I'll feel forgiven.
Well, when you look back, so when it came to an afterlife,
No thought.
meaning of this time?
No thought. It was just living for the present moment. And
All right.
whatever happened, happened, and never thought of myself as being a bad person, but definitely never had any concern with being overly good or doing works of mercy by any means.
Well, when you throw out the great moral, the God who established what's right or wrong, you throw that out, it's understandable that there's going to end up with chaos.
Oh, definitely. And
Okay. So your wife says, pick up the Bible.
yes.
That'd be the start of your journey, right?
Yes, it was.
Talk about that. I mean, did you quickly grab it, or?
Yes, I did. And having definitely been,
Probably because Mary said it.
yes. And I was a major league egomaniac at the time, and I had prided myself on having read only 2 books in 25 years, because I said, why should I read what somebody else wrote if I can write something better? But one of the things with coming into the church, I have worked on humility, and I've gotten a lot better. I still think I can write well, but I've toned it down. Now I'll just say I think I can write well, and I'm sure there's better writers out there. And I had shocked Mary, because from the time I picked the Bible up till the time I finished, I pretty much read it straight through. I think it was about only 4 or 5 nights. And admittedly, the only thing I skipped over was Numbers, because I felt that was like being in school again. And I just said, oh, no, if the whole Bible was like this, I don't know if I would have made it
So
through.
what did you think about it? I mean, the first time ever then?
Right, first
Okay.
time ever. And yeah, Mary had said, well, what do you think about it? I said, well, to be honest, hon, you really have to sort of believe at least somewhat. Said, unless these 12 guys, meaning the apostles, perpetrated the greatest hoax in the history of the world, how could you not believe? She said, good. But, because there always has to be a but, you know that. I said, you believe Jesus is God. You believe the Father is God. You believe, if I read right, Jesus died, ascended into heaven, and was seated at the right hand of the Father. I said, how can you sit next to yourself? She said, well, it's part of the Trinity. I said, wait, we're talking about Jesus and the Father. I know Trinity means 3. Let me concentrate on the 2 first. And she said, well, a lot of people struggle with that, think of it as 1 essence, 3 beings. I said, that's fine, but you still can't sit next to yourself. Well, and think of it like shamrock, 1 flower, but 3 different parts. I said, that's fine, but you still can't sit next to yourself. And I said, well, you said you wouldn't pressure me, just read. I said, I did my parts, and now you have to do yours. And she said, okay. And then I found out, only about 4 years later, that she said okay to me, but when we had gone to like the Franciscan monastery on vacation in Washington, she dropped a little note into the prayer box and was saying rosaries and doing a whole lot of praying that she wasn't telling me about.
Yeah.
So as long as we're on it, I guess now is a good time to tell my children I'm doing the same for them. And I'll hear about that when I get home. But it'll be God's will, in His time, like Mary said.
So Mary backs off, but you just finished the scriptures. What happened at that point? I mean, did
Yeah,
it go
she
back
had
up on the
backed
shelf
off.
for a while? Or what?
Yeah, it was basically no mention about it. She kept her word. She didn't pressure me. And then it was, I guess, about 6 weeks later. It was around midnight, and I was almost asleep. I've always been a restless sleeper. Mary's always been a sound sleeper, but once you wake her up, it takes like hours to get back. So she wasn't happy when I turned to her and said, what do you want? She said, well, I wanted to sleep, which I was doing. I said, no, hon, what do you want? She said, what are you talking about? I said, come on, hon, it's late. She said, I know, I'm trying to sleep. I said, didn't you just tap me on the shoulder? She said, no. I said, hon, you didn't? She said, no. I said, well, I was just tapped 3 times. She said, how many? I said, 3. She said, and what is it you've been struggling with? And before I could answer, she said the Trinity, and my answer was, where do we sign up for RCIA? And that was just the start.
Because you knew.
Oh, I knew it was a personal invitation from God, and even though I had minor superstitions throughout my life, I didn't look at this as, ooh, bad things will happen. I said, just for the first time I guess I was ever really humble in my life, I said, how can I turn down such a personal invitation from God? Not me, and I knew from that moment that this was meant to be.
Well, if that had happened to you 10 years before, what might you have thought?
If it was the same circumstances, yes, I would have still felt it was a personal invitation. But had somebody said to me it had happened to them, I don't think it would have had any effect.
You knew it was real. And to me, that's the work of grace, right? I mean,
oh, definitely. And, you know, many times I've asked Mary, I still ask, I say, why me? Why not other relatives of mine? Why not all the close friends I grew up with that were Jewish? I said, how come this didn't happen to them? And she kept saying, it's very simple, it's grace. I said, it's still difficult to understand. I can understand, but it's still difficult.
All right, so you've had a tap on the shoulder and you've read the Bible.
3 of them.
You're 3 taps on the shoulder. It's still a long way from going from basically an atheistic Jew into the Catholic Church. Keep telling us, because it probably wasn't just an easy in at this point.
No, it wasn't that difficult. My brother's still to this day, I think, has a difficult time in accepting it. I think he's become more tolerant. My children from the beginning, and they're Jewish from their mother, they were happy for me. They saw the difference almost instantly in my life. Less anger. I mean, I'm by no means a saint now, where I'm not going to sit here and tell who knows how many people are watching that I never lose my temper. Even my students at high school will attest that no, that's not true, but they can push you too. I love them though. It's just, you know, it was difficult basically with my brother. But it was, and it's, I think, the type of person I am. The beginning stages of RCIA are, as you're familiar, I'm sure, called the inquiry stage. And for me, there was no inquiry. I would not have gone in saying, I want to see. When I went in, I knew I was going to convert. The only stumbling block I had was when I was told who was running the RCIA at the parish where my wife was going with her mother. I went up to Sister and I said, you know, I'm curious, I want more information about going through RCIA, but I understand one of the things is, as a Catholic, you have to be able to forgive. I said, now, how far does that go? Because there's some people in my life I don't think I could really ever forgive, and to be honest, I really don't want to forgive them at this point. And she said, well, do you think it's in you to pray that someday you'll have the ability to forgive? I said, yeah, I think I can handle that. She said, okay, we're still in business. And I'm jumping the gun a little, but the day after the Easter Vigil in '99, when I was baptized, confirmed, and received Eucharist, the first thing I did on Easter was go into the chapel and pray for all the people that I had said I could never forgive. And when I told them that the first day back at RCIA, they were shocked. Even though I had come that far in the 9 months, they were still shocked at that.
Yeah. When you were, of course, Jesus models that from the cross. You know, the Lord, God forgive them, Father forgive them.
They know not what they do.
They know not what they do. And that's such a call for our own humility. When you were going through the RCIA program and dealing with the different doctrines of the church, did you, I mean, of course, it sounds like from the touch of the Lord that your heart was cut through and you were focusing right on Christ. And so all the stuff was kind of coming in and taking it in as you're focused on Jesus. Anything difficult in that part of the journey of the dogmas of the church?
No, nothing really difficult. I mean, to be honest, the greatest education I got was from my wife, and later on, which hopefully we'll get to, I ended up at the seminary.
Go ahead and talk about that. After you come into the church, it seemed like right away you were hearing a call.
Right, I became pretty active, I think, well, the next year I went back to RCIA as a member of the team, became a Eucharistic minister, part of one of the committees they had there. The name escapes me at the time. And then we had switched parishes and became a member of the adoration team, Age for Friends, Knights of Columbus, which all I'm still involved in now, and our adoration team, which is very extraordinary in itself. But my wife had asked me one day, would I go to listen to a speaker who she had seen on EWTN, and since she credits Mother Angelica and EWTN for her reversion and coming back to the church after having been away, I said, well, it worked for you? I said, okay. She didn't have to twist my arm that much. And we went, and the speaker was Father Karapi, who was just magnificent. Yeah. And I walked out of there, and the only thing I could think of was what I had read in Luke, I believe 12:48. To he who much is given, much is expected. To he who more is given, more is expected. And I said, I have to do more with my life. You know I still had the dream about the screenwriting, but it became meaningless at the point. You know, the reasons I originally wanted that with independence, money, etc., it had no importance. Where I was and what I was being called to do was the important thing to do in my life. And I went to the Adoration Chapel, which was the first time in my life. And I was only there about 5 minutes, and it came to me, work with the youth. Then my next thing was to decide how, and did more praying. Then it was teach. Teach them about God, teach them about religion. But unfortunately, my degree was in phys ed, in health. So I said, well, how are we going to accomplish this? And I started checking out things, and it ended up that I needed 24 credits to teach in the Archdiocese of Philadelphia. You could start teaching with 18, and within 2.5 years, you had to get the last 6. So over 9 months after work, I ran down to the seminary, and in the 9 months, I took my 6 courses, the 18 credits. But I do have to add that I didn't want to get lost the first night and miss the first class, so Mary and I took a ride down. And as soon as we got on the grounds of the seminary, it was just like, I don't remember which one of us started crying first, but I was sitting there saying, Myron Moskowitz at St. Charles Seminary, St. Charles Borromeo Seminary, to take credits to teach theology in a Catholic school. I said, you talked about a theme, God's mercy. Only God could do that.
And his humor, too.
Yes, yes, because he knows I hated school with a passion. And that was the other thing. I said, no, and I got my 18 credits, and I applied for jobs, and it seems that was the first year they had less openings than applicants. But about 3 days before school started, a principal from Cardinal Doherty called me and said, oh, we have your application and we have an opening in phys ed. I said, phys ed? I said, my application was to teach theology. Well, we have it for phys ed. I said, I don't know why. Well, would you like to come for the interview? And I did some thinking, saying, well, God's taken me this, maybe that's the setting he wants me in, and thy will be done. Let's take it one step at a time. And I guess I did well on the interview. I'm finishing my second year there now. And what I try to do is just bring God and Jesus into the classroom. Probably anyone teaching theology is going to bring it in to the theology room, but hopefully the dimension I'm adding by bringing it into the health classroom is his work. That's what he wants for now.
So it would be an understatement at this point to talk about where God is in your life right now in terms of the center.
He is my life.
Yeah. Which is amazing.
Yes.
As you shared your story. But even another step more amazing in a couple minutes for our break is talk about adoration of the Blessed Sacrament. I mean, again, would you have believed 20-some years ago that you would find adoration in the chapel meaningful? Talk about how that's become meaningful.
Well, one of the courses I took at the seminary was the catechism. And remember, like it was yesterday, the teacher was Father Hunt. And he had made a statement concerning the Eucharist that with true presence, he said there are a lot of things that, when he debates religion, he'll sort of back off so that he doesn't end up in a debate that he knows nobody's going to concede. He said, but if you tell him that Jesus isn't truly present in the Eucharist, that's where he will debate forever. And I remember him clearly saying, if you read John 6:51, when it says eat, the footnotes say it's not the classic Greek meaning of the word eat, it's to munch and to gnaw. He said, and you cannot munch, you cannot gnaw on a symbol. And whenever I do go and give my witness, I say, it's just so true, and hopefully that will stick with me longer than anything else as long as I live. But to have further affirmation of that, like I said earlier, I did go to our adoration team. It was basically after seeing in our parish bulletin St. Ignatius in Yardley in PA. They had it in, I think, 6-7 weeks where they needed someone for the team at 2 to 3 in the morning. And I said, well, if it's been here 7 weeks, I have a feeling it's not going to be filled so quick, so might as well do it. And I'd gone about 6 weeks. Then it was October 10th of 2001. It was about 20 after 2 in the morning. And I was a little more tired than usual because I get up at around 4:30. And I had just shut my eyes for a minute, didn't fall asleep. I was in the back pew. I just shut them. And when I opened them, in front of the Blessed Sacrament was Jesus in a white robe with a red robe under it. On the bottom of the red robe was the X with the P, the Cairo, the symbol of Christ. It was a side profile. He's about 6'1", shoulder length hair, just took 2 steps and vanished. And when I came home, I woke Mary up. I said, are you going to think I'm crazy? And she said, more so than normal? I said, no, just... And I told her what happened, and she believed me, of course. And since then, up till about a month ago, she told me that it's basically, she believes, because she feels I've been faithful since I came into the church, and this was a blessing, a thank you for being faithful. And I said, no. I said, again, I was practicing, hopefully, humility. I said, there are far greater people than I that I'm sure have not been this blessed. I feel it's because Jesus knows I am out there trying at parishes, RCIAs, whoever will let me come in for free to give my witness story, my testimony to Jesus, to his power, his love, his mercy. And I said, and I just believe this is his way of telling me, add this as the exclamation. I am truly present. And like I said, up to about a month ago when Mary said, you know, I think you're right.
God is very merciful to us.
Yes, he is.
And I love that statement in the Mass where we say, Lord, I am unworthy to receive you, but only say the word and I shall be healed. I mean, it's our affirmation of our call to be humble, to recognize who we are in relationship to God, but yet his wonderful love, all-empowering love that transforms us. We're going to take a break. I think during the break or at some point there you might see Myron's email. If you want more information about his journey or about what he's doing now, you can contact him. Like he said, he does some speaking around. If you're interested in hearing more about his journey, you can contact him. Otherwise, we're back just a moment with your questions for Myron. See you in a bit. Welcome back. We're here with Myron Moskowitz, and thank you for sharing your story with us.
My pleasure.
And reminding us that God speaks to us. God reaches out to us. You know, the majority of the world who are caught in the horizontal just see these things as coincidences or, something you ate bad for lunch. But it's a work of grace that turns our eyes upward and recognizes when God's touching us, and that's a reminder.
Well, hopefully I'm proof he doesn't give up on us either.
All right. Well, thank you for that. We're getting some emails ready. One question before we go to maybe our first email or caller. Where was Mary, not Mary your wife, but Mary the mother of Jesus in this journey? Was that?
No, it wasn't a factor.
No.
Well, like I said, before I did any reading or anything, it just...
You didn't know about
barely knew who she was,
okay.
Except the mother of Jesus, and that was the extent. And
right.
Now she's a big part. She is the mother of Jesus, and that's where it all begins.
Yeah.
So she has to be a big part.
In your sense, you came into the journey without all the negative propaganda that so many of us had to work through in our journey into the church,
right,
discovering things that the church really didn't believe in, all that.
I like to think it was more a conversion of the heart than the mind, because I didn't do a lot of reading and compare it to this other religion or that other religion. It was just
accept the beauty of the church.
It was like, Paul getting thrown off his horse. The taps that's what it was for me.
All right. We have a caller ready. Let's take our first caller. Hello, what's your name and where are you from?
Jeff from Connecticut.
Hello, Jeff. What's your question for us?
I used to live near St. Charles Borromeo, though, down there near City Line Avenue.
Yes, that's where it is.
Yeah, but my question for Myron is, I was always curious. I'm glad I got a Jewish convert to ask this. I remember I heard during the Nazi regime that the Poles had many Jews who would convert to escape the persecution, and the priests said they were just amazing how they understood everything because the church is designed for them, and just how they knew every prophet pointing the way once it was all explained. I was running to the modern day United States Jewish person. Have you tried to present this to your brother or anyone as far as like when Jesus read Isaiah and said, or that John's the voice of the wilderness and all?
Not as much as my wife Mary would like me to. And maybe the fact is because, it's family and I don't want to alienate them more. And to be honest, I think they're pretty set in their ways. My brother recently, I think, has been more understanding, but if me telling them that Jesus was 10 feet in front of me hasn't done it, I don't think there's anything I can give them in the Bible to read that would make them change.
Jeff made an interesting point, and that is that here we have Jews possibly, supposedly, converting to the church with the idea of escaping, whether that was, we don't want to question their conversion. But the point was, though, that once they came in, they began to see these parallels. Did you see that, or did you have enough of a background to start seeing them?
No, I had no background.
Okay.
I would not have seen them.
Okay, I will
at all.
confirm then from others we've had in the show, like both Rosalind and David, that was part of what drew them to the church when they began seeing this unbelievable parallel connection between things Catholic and things Jewish. And of course, the person that first pointed that out so clearly to me was Scott Hahn. And that was one of the issues that brought him into the church when he began to recognize the continuity, the beautiful parallel in the entire history of salvation. It's not like we have one old book, throw it out, now we got a new one. It was just beautiful continuity. So let's take our next caller. Hello, what's your name and where you're from?
My name is Jan, and I'm from Front Royal, Virginia. Hello, Marcus.
Hello, Jan. Thank you for calling. What's your question for us?
I have a question for Myron. I have a similar experience as you. I came from no religion, no religious background, and I read the Bible, and I came into the church in the Jubilee year in 2000.
Oh, welcome home.
My question is, how do you deal with your experience with your family? If you weren't raised in a religious background and you didn't share. Oh, I'm so nervous. I don't know how to explain myself.
You're nervous. Why don't you try sitting here?
I have a hard time relating to my family, my parents and my brothers, because I can't approach them with the Bible. They don't want to talk about God. How do you have that problem? And if you do, how do you deal with that?
Well, when I had first made up my mind, it was before I mentioned it to anyone, and I had told myself, this is what I'm doing. This is what God wants me to do. God is the one I'm going to answer to the rest of my life. Not any family member, not anybody on earth. And just, I hoped that they would understand and support me. And luckily they still speak to me, so I'd say to that degree they've understood. Support could get into a matter of semantics with the words, but it was just something that nobody could have stopped me from doing, just as today nobody can stop me from sitting up here and saying, I love Jesus Christ. There's no way I'll do that.
Family's often the hardest of all those in our connections in life to reach, to touch, partially because they know us so well. But because of that, that's where Jesus' encouragement to recognize the fruit comes in. Because what's that quote? I forget if it was St. Ignatius or said something about evangelizing and if necessary use words.
St. Francis.
St. Francis,
Right.
okay.
Always preach the gospel and when necessary use words.
All right. Well, see, in our witness to family, that is very important because, I mean, you're an example of who would have guessed 20 years ago, knowing you and your background, that you would today be here surrendered to Jesus Christ.
Nobody.
And love. No one would have guessed it,
Nobody.
let alone yourself, but anyone. But now your family can see that. Of course, now it's our responsibility to make sure they see Jesus in us.
Hopefully, yes.
And there's the call to grow in holiness and continue to surrender. But you see, that's the best. You said that's the best witness to our family.
But you know, I take it a step further. Even if it's not them and I can't win them over, maybe there's one person watching tonight that will at least give it some thought. You know, maybe there's somebody watching that is trying to get through to somebody else, and they'll just say, why don't you just pick up the Bible? You do the reading, and without saying it to them, and I feel confident, like Mary did with me, that the Holy Spirit will take it from
Well, we
there.
don't want to forget one of the most important things Mary was doing all along, right?
Praying.
I mean, there's the most important thing that we can encourage the people at home.
Yes,
To
like
never
I said,
give
she
up.
wasn't telling me, but she was praying, and to show an example of the power of prayer, one time before we were married and I was in Mary's car, she had gotten a prayer card. And she said, well, do you want to drive the new car? I said, yeah, but I'm not really comfortable with that. She said, well, it's my car. I'm not taking it out. And as soon as she said that, some car came speeding by and I just missed the car. And she said, But when we were at the monastery, I had picked up, we were at different ends of the gift shop, and I picked up some prayer cards. And as we were leaving, Mary started to take them. And I said, no, I'll hold on to this one. I'll keep it in the car. And again, she told me later, she said she had just prayed to the Blessed Mother, and then she said, wow, you work quick. And I still have it in, now I mentioned with the car, now my car sort of looks like a shrine. I have the prayer card and a visor clip and the Good Shepherd on the dashboard.
Here's another example you gave to me earlier about, again, looking at the connections of how God leads us. I was talking about the cross.
Oh, yes. As I mentioned to you earlier, and I said tonight, I was never a great student, had no interest. But for some reason, I had remembered something that I had heard in the 8th grade, and it was the phrase Latin, in hoc signis. Then, my marks not being what you would want coming out of high school, I remember I went to the guidance counselor for help in finding a college. He basically threw me a book and said, with those marks, find one yourself. And I found New Mexico State University, and the city it happens to be in is Las Cruces, New Mexico, which means the crosses. And like I said, I'm teaching in an archdiocesan high school in Philadelphia. There's 22 of them, and the one I'm at, its motto is Crucis Signis Vinus, which again, by the sign of the cross. So it was meant to be.
All right, the Lord, I mean, that's part of our awakening to God, is recognizing that He's always involved in our life all the time. He knows us better than we know ourselves. He knows our weaknesses, and that's the beauty of our faith, that we can stand before Him in need of His forgiveness, but yet as we are, and asking for grace to change us as we desire to grow more like Him. Let's take another caller. Hello, what's your name and where are you calling from?
This is Molly. I'm calling from Virginia.
Hello, Molly. What's your question for us?
Well, I have a question. Now, if your guest found out that it was his wife that tapped him that night, would that change his faith, or has his faith grown, and has he, established a deeper relationship with Jesus?
Thank you very much.
A deeper relation with Jesus, and even if I would be upset, but even if I found out it was Mary that tapped me, I know on October 10th it wasn't Mary 10 feet in front of me. So if she can do that, that's even all the more reason to believe, because that's a miracle.
Yeah.
But now my faith is, as it was when I was going through RCIA, people were telling me the night of the vigil, it's not the end of your journey, it's only the beginning. And it truly, I still feel I'm on the beginning, and hopefully there's just a lot more work I get to do for the Lord.
Let's say that there's some folk watching that either themselves are where you were, and maybe they're open, or maybe they have friends who are where you were. Give some words of encouragement to folk. I mean, you mentioned prayer.
If I had to put it in one word, it would be prayer.
Okay.
In other words, support. Be there for them. I would really recommend what Mary did. Yeah. Read the Bible if you don't know. It's like growing up with, and I was in a almost all Jewish neighborhood. It wasn't, and I've been asked this since I converted, like, well, what did you think of Christians growing up? Was there a lot of bashing and everything? I said, no, there was just no mention. It was like Christians just didn't exist. So there couldn't be bashing because it was never mentioned.
Yeah.
I'm sure if I asked all the people I grew up with the significance of, Good Friday, Easter, other than them saying it's two Christian holidays, they would not know, and I don't think 10 years ago I would have known.
To me, that's a very good point in this sense, is that, if you were trying to look back to come up with, would there have been a word or something that might have cut through the wall of your resistance, and the reality is it's hard to figure out that exact word because it is grace. And so we're torn. We could become discouraged and say there isn't anything that cut through, and so give up, but yet also recognize that God can use anything.
Yes, He can.
If we surround a person with love in our friendship, and that's why we really encourage folk that, if you have someone in your family that's really drifted bad, and the temptation is to say, I want nothing to do with them. But they need our love more than ever in those times. They need our prayers, they need our love. And you mentioned something which is difficult on the journey, and that's forgiveness.
Oh, yeah.
It isn't easy, that forgiveness. But even as you witnessed yourself, God is able to do. What's the angel say to Mary? All things are possible with God.
It's true. I remember, as most people do, September 11th, I had gotten a call at school, and it was only my second day. And they'd asked me to come down to the office. And Mary was on the phone, and she told me that, what was going on at the World Trade Center. And I must have just been in another world, because I said, okay, well, I'll be home. I'll call you back after next 2 periods. I have classes. My son was working in the 79th floor of the second building. And thank God he survived. He got out all right. But I still think that on the ride home, and especially after I heard what was happening, I really thought there was no way he would get out of there. But without sounding too prideful, the one thing I am prideful of is I never said, why me, God? As much as it would have torn my heart out. I would have never been the same, and I know how people do, but I would have never blamed God.
But yes, but that realization is fruit of the reality of God's grace in your life. In other words,
definitely.
That's what it is.
That's why I mentioned it. That I could have never said that 5 years ago. Never.
Thank God for the
And if
changes
somebody
He
asked
does.
me, what would you say in that circumstance, I would have said I would have blamed everybody and anything. And it's like I had mentioned when my brother was shot, my parents didn't even tell me for a week. And I'd asked them why, and they said, well, you would have done something stupid, like said, I'm going over there to avenge it. I said, you're right, I'm glad you didn't tell me, and thank God he's okay too.
All right. Well, thank God for what He's done in our lives. And Myron, thank you for your witness to us.
Thank you for having me.
And our prayer is that those who have been watching have been encouraged by your word. And as you mentioned earlier, every once in a while you get a chance to go and speak at parishes.
Whoever asks me, I'll be there. If I can get there, I'll be there.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. Thank you for joining us. Then.
Thank you.
And thanks, Mary, for her witness.
I do
She's
every
the
day.
quiet witness behind your story.
Definitely the instrument of God on earth.
All right. Thank you. Okay. We'll be back in just a moment with some final words for the journey home. See you then. Welcome back. Our wonderful witness this evening, Myron Moskowitz, is demonstrated through his own humility, growing humility. We're both growing in humility as God keeps chipping away at the stone. He demonstrates, though, what God can do when we let Him have our heart and our mind and our lives. We surrender to Jesus. And it reminded me a couple things. One of a scripture text from Luke 7 about the centurion's servant's healed. It's connected to the text in John 4 that was our gospel lesson for the Mass today. But particularly in Luke 7, we hear this about the centurion that came to Jesus and asked him to heal his servant. And when Jesus talks to him, the man gives this response. He says, "Lord, do not trouble yourself, for I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. Therefore I did not presume to come to you, but say the word, and let my servant be healed." Now, it's from that we get that phrase in the Mass. But Jesus then, after the man says this, and Jesus says, "I tell you, not in Israel have I found such faith." The example being that this man so trusted that God has the power to change, that Jesus had the power to heal his servant, that he didn't need to drag him along and need to see it. He just trusted. And that's the kind of trust we're called to have in God. Whether it's because we really want God to touch someone else's heart in our life that we just can't figure out how to break through the wall. We need to have the faith of the centurion. Lord, I know that you know that person better than I ever can. And you know what that person needs, so I trust you and pray that you will bless them. That's the kind of faith we are to have, is to ask that for others, but also ask that he would break through the hardness of our own hearts. Myron's written a book. What's the title of your book? I'm sorry?
Lost Sheep Comes Home.
The Lost Sheep Comes Home. And as I was preparing for the program, I was down in my room and I had an album, one of my favorite albums. And one of the songs in the album was this wonderful song, "Someone to Watch Over Me" by George Gershwin. And I was listening to the song, and of course the words of the song is, "I'm a little lamb that's lost in the woods. I know I should always be good, but I need someone to watch over me." And of course, when George Gershwin wrote the song, it was about human love and human need. But in that song, it points to the fact that every one of us has within us that God-given gift that helps us know that we need someone to watch over us. We know that we have a Creator that is there. And though many will run away and say he doesn't exist, yet he is there. And Myron's life is an example of God touching him to let him know that he had someone to watch over. And you do too. He loves you more than you will ever know. And no matter how far you feel from him, he is right there with you, beckoning you to invite him into your life. Invite Jesus, your Savior, into your life. Pray to him, and he will bless you with his love. God bless. I'll see you again next week.